What's good, Illini Nation? It's your man in the middle, Deon Thomas, and as always, bringing you nothing but the best. Here we are in season 2. So, of course, we bringing in, I guess a little bit of collection of those that cover Illini sports other than myself. And tonight, we have one of the absolute best. I mean, Jeremy Werner is the I guess I wouldn't say producer, but he has his podcast at Jeremy Werner. He's also the Illini Inquirer. He also is 24/7 Sports. This man is everything and everything and all things. I think that sounds a little bit better. Everything and all things Illini Sports. Covers football, covers basketball. So who better to have in today's conversation since there was such big news broke today? Jeremy, I appreciate you for joining me, my man. Welcome to Champaign on Ice.
What an intro. I don't think I'm deserving of that from the all-time winning scorer at Illinois, but I appreciate it, Deon. And for all the times you came on with me, radio, podcasting, I feel like, So anytime you text, it's like, yep, I will come on. Plus, you picked good timing with the Kofi Cockburn news today to chat some Illini basketball.
Oh, yeah, it is, man. And we'll get into that. But, I know you've been covering the team for many years, and you've seen this year's team now in a couple of exhibitions. The first one, of course, was against the St. Francis team, which is an NAIA team. And then we have this one against Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is a very, very good Division II program. Tell me, what are your thoughts right now early on about this team?
Yeah, I think it's a talented team, Deon. I think we're excited about these pieces that Brad Underwood has, and it should be a very, very good team eventually. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how these pieces fit them together and how Brad Underwood kind of figures out, who should I start? What's our rotation going to be? How do we fit Omar Payne and Alfonso Plummer into here? How do we consistently defend with this team? Because I think that's his focus right now, because part of what made last year's team so good was its ability to defend every night and give yourself a chance. And I think this team might be a little bit more inconsistent with that. But eventually I think Brad Underwood will coach it out of them. But I do think you felt good. You got in front of fans. You felt the lights against St. Francis, and you blow them out as you should. But then Brad got exactly what he wanted in that D2 test from Indiana, PA, which, to be honest with you, I think showed a little bit of the flaw of Illinois of guarding big guards. And with Trent Frazier suffering that injury, you only got one primary ball handler when Trent was out. So that is a concern for this team. But I think it kind of humbled that team I think every team that comes in with a ranking probably has to feel that. I know Purdue had an exhibition game where they didn't play as well as they wanted to play. So I think these are the necessary things you want to get out of an exhibition, that, hey, you got to bring it every night, because the other team's shooting for you. You are now a top 15 team, and people are going to try and beat you. So Arkansas State, Jackson State, they are going to play like it's their Super Bowl. And even Marquette early on, like, that is a huge home game for them to kind of, show something to the country, show something to their fans. So I think they learned a valuable lesson. Even though it's an experienced team, it's a different team than last year. So I think the exhibition went exactly the way Brad Underwood would have wanted it.
Oh, yeah. And being a former coach myself, I can tell you exactly, yes, because you want to win the game, of course, because you don't ever, even if it's an exhibition game, you don't want to lose. But the great thing about it is you want great teaching moments. You want great tape. And he got a lot of that, because this team was really good. It showed you, what would we look like if we don't have Trent and DeMonte, our super seniors, on the floor? How do we operate when someone takes or tries to take Kofi away from us? What do we do? Because that team did a great job of just sinking down into the lane, saying, hey, Kofi Cockburn's not going to beat us, so you guys have to figure out other ways. And one of those other ways, which wasn't really a surprise to me, and I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to you, was Coleman Hawkins. I mean, Coleman has, coaches spoke highly of him since he's come in as a freshman. He's put on about 15 to 20 pounds. I mean, he was one of those kids that I was hoping to see, and I was excited to see what that jump would be. So we saw him. Give me your thoughts on him and what you thought and your thoughts on the rest of the cast, other than, say, an Andre Cabello or Kofi or Trent Frazier. We know those guys.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point of not having Trent and DeMonte, two guys that can guard. They are so important to what Illinois does defensively, and I think that showed. Andre was attacked a little bit, and Alfonso Plummer, great shooter, but not exactly a great defender. So I think that showed, and then those guys got to focus on that. As for Coleman Hawkins, he's just such an intriguing piece, isn't he? And I feel the same way about Austin Hutcherson, because they're what this team has lacked the last couple years, which is a four-man who can stretch the floor for Coleman Hawkins, right? A guy who can be versatile defensively, where he can protect the rim, but also he can switch onto guards and be effective and bother some people, get into passing lanes. What a perfect kind of ideal complement, theoretically at least, to Kofi Cockburn, is a guy who can hit an open three in the corner, or if a team sags off him like Indiana PA was the other day, he can make you pay, every once in a while with that three, but also running the court. You are going to get rewarded running the court if you're a big man. I'm sure you would have loved it, Deon, with Andre Curbelo. Andre has made some mistakes, and I think he's learning how he's got to play as a high usage player, right? Like a really high usage player and the primary ball handler at all times. So he's got to find that balance, but he's had a bunch of assists these first two games, and most of them in transition. And Coleman Hawkins can just be a great finisher and get a lot of easy points in transition. So I think he's been probably the most encouraging player through these first two games, because I think you and I know, Deon, he's a very intelligent basketball player. And he's kind of always known, playing with Jalen Green and Amari Burnett at Prolific Prep, he knows what he had to do. Like, he went there to figure out what his role was going to be at the next level. He knew he could have been the star at Antelope High School in California and put up crazy numbers, but he knew, and his dad knew, as being a good player himself in college, that was the best way to prepare him for success in college. And I think it has. I think he knows, like he said the other night, I have to take 1,000 shots in practice to make one shot, maybe in a game. And I think he knows, like, I can thrive off this supporting role this year. And then maybe junior, senior year, I'm one of the stars of this team. So I would start him, Deon. I like the mix of him in the starting lineup, whether it's with Jacob Grandison or DeMonte Williams. I like bringing DeMonte off the bench to bring you that defensive effort, to bring you just that veteran leadership. I just think him as a second unit guy is, he's still probably a 20-minute a game guy, but I just kind of like bringing him off the bench. But then I think Austin Hutcherson's a really intriguing player. I don't know how long he'll be out with that tailbone, but he was the other guy I was really looking forward to seeing this exhibition, because this is his third year here, but we haven't seen him on the basketball court yet. So I thought the one exhibition game he played, it showed why he was so good at the D3 level, because he's got length, athleticism, skill that just is rare at that level. So I think he's got those things that can work at the Big Ten. I think those things translate. I wonder how he'll deal with physicality. Like that for Coleman and Austin Hutcherson are the things I worry about, is can they handle physicality? But they just give him two pieces, Deon, that they don't have a lot of length out there on the wing outside of those guys. I know DeMonte has longer arms, but to have taller guys, athletic guys on the wing, I think they could be huge for their depth, especially with a small backcourt when you have Andre Curbelo, Trent Frazier, and Alfonso Plummer.
No, and I agree with you. And one of the things I love most about I did a podcast with Coleman Hawkins. And in that pod, I asked him, what did you take from your freshman year, all of those games, including the Big Ten tournament championship? Did you value the most out of that? And this young man's answer was the loss to Baylor. He was like, when I was out there on the floor with those guys, watching them, I realized what I need to do. I realized the work I need to put in. I realized what I need to do in the weight room. I saw all of these things of what a big time college basketball player looks like. That's rare for any player to choose a loss, as their favorite moment, or the moment the light came on where they had their epiphany on what they need to do to play at the next level. But I love what you said about Austin Hutcherson. I agree with you 100% on both things. Can he take the physical pounding of the Big Ten? Will he be available and be around? Because they both add so much to what Brad is going to want to do. He doesn't want to have to play his freshman unless he has to play his freshman. And speaking of those freshmen, RJ Melendez has had two very, very good showings. Now, again, against lower competition, I guess, but what he's shown on the defensive end, on the rebounding, on the glass. For a freshman coming in, those things are huge. And also the same thing with Goody. He's played some really good minutes. And I think later on, Potts is going to come around. Playing basketball in Wisconsin is different than playing against the guys you're playing against now. These guys are bigger, stronger, faster, the whole nine. But what do you see in those freshmen that I can tell you right now, I'm very excited about them. But that's why I want to hear your opinion in covering Illinois sports.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it with Coleman. I think there's a lot of benefit in him having a father who succeeded at the D1 level. And I think he's got that feedback from his dad of how to take these things. And I think that's part of it. That's the part, like I noticed as a freshman, the few times we talked with Coleman, there's just a maturity about him and thinking about the game and the process. I see that with Luke Goody. I think Luke Goody knows exactly what he has to do to potentially get a role on this team. He's a big kid. I mean, 6'7", he might be close to 6'8", really long, not that most athletic, not the quickest guy. So I think he'll struggle defensively, but he knows where to be and when to be there. He crashes the boards. I think that's really important. And I just think he's a really good shooter. Right? He's going to eventually take Jacob Grandison's role. And I think he's going to be a really good, starter eventually for Illinois. RJ Melendez has a higher ceiling. That is for sure. He's skinnier. Luke Goody's looks like a football player, right? He was a high school quarterback. Luke Goody's ready to play physically in the Big Ten, but RJ's got to add some strength. But he did have there was like a 4 possession stretch there against Indiana, PA. I think you know what I'm talking about, Deon, where he stymied a guy one-on-one, used his length and quickness to stop him, had 2 rebounds, might have had a blocker, a deflection on one of them. It was just,
charge.
That's what it was. He was taking a charge. Yeah. He had, that was the flash, and I hope it was for him too. And I'm sure, Brad, that's your way to the court. Like you don't need to score to play on this team, but what does this team lack? Like when we see that from Hutcherson and Hawkins and Melendez, it's because Illinois, well, they have the big man, they've had the guard play. They haven't had those athletic wings that, Maryland throws at you in waves, that Michigan's going to throw at you in waves this year. So if you can start adding more of those pieces, and it clearly was addressed in this class for that reason, that's where I get excited about those guys, especially for the long term, that you have Hawkins and Hutcherson and Melendez that just give you much needed length and athleticism where, if you can get 1 or 2 of those guys to play really well this year on top of the knowns, which is a lot, like you have Curbelo, Cockburn, and then obviously Frazier and Williams and Grandison, like that just adds to the depth and the versatility of your team. And, Illinois has to play a certain way. If they can get a little bit more versatile, I'm sure Brad Underwood would love to employ that.
And I think that's one of those things that comes with time, as you just mentioned. They have to figure out various ways to play. Right now, they run, and when they can get up and down the court, and a little bit of this last year, when they can get up and down the court and transition, no one can beat them. I mean, there's very few teams that can compete. Teams want to slow Illinois down. They want you to play in half court, and that has kind of been our Achilles heel over the last couple of years. I mean, it was really, in my opinion, a lot of lack of shooting. This year, we don't have a lack of shooting. So it'll really be interesting to see where they go from an execution, X's and O's standpoint in the half court. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'm really interested because Curbelo can just break people down, right? Like his ability to get penetration. That's why it's so important for him to learn the balance of, hey, when to take the single and when to go for the home run, right? So I'm really interested to see how he develops there, but I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be one of the best point guards in the country, and have him and Cockburn, guys who can't stretch the floor, but to now have Trent Frazier, DeMonte Williams, Jacob Grandison, Coleman Hawkins, and then a guy that can just get a shot off from anywhere, no matter how a defense is guarding him. Alfonso Plummer's release is as quick as I've seen. His footwork is as good as I've seen. He's exciting to add, at least on that end. I don't want him breaking down people off the dribble, and defensively, I worry about him a little bit. I think he can guard on the ball because he's strong, but just a strong base, great release. And he's obviously been accurate at this level. So that's a lot of shooting around those 2 guys who aren't obviously outside shooters. I think we'll see more from Curbelo. But I'm interested from you, Deon, like how do they play offensively that's different than last year? It's just obvious they are going to try and get up and down, get more 3-point shots up, because they shot threes well last year, but they just didn't shoot a lot of them. Because they couldn't create those kind of shots. I think they'll be able to create those shots a heck of a lot more.
Oh, I agree. I mean, especially when you have a guard like Andre Curbelo. I mean, and you ask how they play. One, you're going to spread guys out. And I mean, and this is one of the things that Illinois has done well. They've showed a little bit of this so far in these 2 exhibition games, is running that high screen and roll action. And even using a horns action where they get in the big rolling and they get that 4-man to pop. So now you have 2 fours, whether it's Granderson or whether it's Hawkins, that can step out and knock down threes. It really is going to put pressure on people to choose your poison. You know, are you going to sit back there the way Indiana PA did against Kofi, or are you going to come out and guard? And when that happens, now you have guys like Curbelo that can get downhill. Trent has showed an ability to get downhill that he hadn't showed in the past, as well as adding that pull-up mid-range and floater. These first couple of games, we'll see how that continues to as we move forward. But when you have someone like Curbelo, and you, I think it was great when you said hit singles, and you don't have to hit a home run or know when to hit a home run. That's what he's going to have to learn, because he's going to take over that IO role as the closer, the finisher. But one of the things I think he brings, and I'd like to know your opinion on this, is not just as a finisher. When Io went to the basket, we knew 90% of the time that was a shot going up. I think you're almost in a 50-50, 60-40 either way when you have Andre Curbelo, especially once the light comes on.
Yeah, it's a different kind of closing, right? Like it's he can still be the closer, but it might be to find Alfonso Plummer for an open 3, right? Like, I mean, Io's as good as it gets. And that's why you don't want to bring it down to all those late game situations, because you just knew he could bail you out. And he had supreme confidence in those moments when they matter most to do it. And Andre's got to deal with that, and we'll see how he does. But he did it in Indiana, right? Like last year in overtime, he was the one making those plays, and he looked comfortable doing it. So yeah, I think it's a different way. But I like that he can finish around the rim. He's pretty crafty around there. I do want to see him shoot free throws better than he's shot in the exhibition, because he's going to get a lot of them. He should get a lot of free throws this year, and he's got some good runners. He's got reverses and things. So he actually is a pretty good finisher around the rim for a guy his size. But he's got the ability and an ability Io didn't have as much. I mean, we saw Io have some great games as a distributor, but we just know Andre Curbelo's got this rare ability to see things other people don't see on the court. It's like he has an extra set of eyes. It's just going to be a little bit different. And I do think he's got better shooters around him than Io had. And you mentioned it, like, with what Loyola did last year with Illinois, to have a guy like Hawkins there could really help them kind of combat that kind of style of defense.
Well, before we move on to the next one, let me tell you guys about a little bit of my partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now's the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today and by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. With a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. So JB, there's been a lot of things that have gone on since this summer, and I'd like to get your opinion. We lost 3 coaches. We bring in 3 coaches.
Yeah.
Brad, I think, in my opinion, has done a tremendous job with the staff he's brought in. But I'd like to hear what you say, because, let's be honest. There are very few people in this country that recruit like an Orlando Antigua. Very few. There are very few X's and O's guys like a Stephen Gentry in this country. And there are very few guys that's a great glue guy to be able to go out and have connections in Chicago and Texas and some of the other places that Chen Coleman brought. So we lose those 3 guys. We elevate Jeff Alexander. We bring in Tim Anderson. and then we bring home Chester Frazier. Your thoughts on those three guys?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how what's the word I want to use with this? It's pretty amazing how tough Brad Underwood was with all this. I mean, you have your best season. You have a coaching staff that you put together that did great things, right? And rebuilt Illinois pretty quickly. I know it doesn't feel that way for Illinois fans because it took like a decade with 3 different coaches to get here, but to go from, bottom of the half Big Ten team to all of a sudden, this is going to be a 3rd straight year you should compete towards a championship, right, in the conference. It's pretty amazing what they were all able to build together. And I think it really stung Brad that he lost guys for assistant coaching positions. But it does show that there are some bigger fish. There's very few of them, but there are bigger fish, and Kentucky is one of them. And John Calipari is one of them that can go steal someone. And kudos to Josh Whitman for the money we hear that was thrown around, the money he invested in the new assistant coaching staff. I think we all, once those things happened, we expected these guys to all fit exactly the guy's profile of who left. And I even did that too. But I think Brad kind of remade this thing a little bit differently. You do have Chester Frazier, who's an alum, and Brad talked a lot about loyalty after this. Chester Frazier's probably not leaving for another assistant coaching job, right? Like his next step is a head coaching job. He left a great thing with a really good coach in Mike Young at Virginia Tech to come here. And I probably, and most of us, didn't realize how good of a recruiter Chester Frazier could be at a school like Illinois, because Virginia Tech doing a good job with their program. Illinois is a historical Big Ten power, right? When it's good, they can be one of the best teams in the country. We've seen that. Virginia Tech has never shown that. So he's already got 2 4-star guards committed in this class. I think he's exactly the type of player Brad Underwood will have to coach. So to have him as a coach and kind of as your right-hand man, I think has been a fantastic hire so far, even though they haven't played any games. It made a lot of sense to keep somebody on staff, right? Like to promote Jeff Alexander, who has been a Division I assistant, even, at a decent level at Evansville. Like, I think Brad really wanted to reward him. And I think Jeff was probably too qualified for his previous job. He wanted to keep that. And I think Jeff has shown more in recruiting than people expected. I think he's pretty connected in state, and he's a very personable person. We just haven't heard from him. Fans haven't heard a lot from him. So I think he'll be fine. I think he can actually be a recruiting upgrade over Stephen Gentry. But Stephen obviously is a very smart analytical coach and did some good things with helping Brad make some changes. And then Tim Anderson, a lot of people plug him into the kind of same Chin Coleman kind of role, but Tim's probably even more proven as a coach than when Chin got here. And that's taking nothing away from Chin, who's had an amazing rise in this coaching industry over the last decade. And now seems like, a guy who could have a head coaching job somewhere soon. But Tim's so connected in the NBA industry, with the AAU industry up in Chicago and even beyond. We have to see how this all plays out. But I think Brad went with guys that are a little bit different than who he had before, but guys he feels like he can trust and that will continue to build what he does. And he talks a lot about Tim's skill development. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out. I have no question Chester and Trent get along well, and Chester will give him exactly what he wants at the guard position. And Jeff has played a role with Kofi all along here in developing him and developing some of these front court pieces. So it's probably not as a headliner of a staff as some people thought when they got here, but I think the early at least off the court things have been pretty encouraging. But kudos to Brad for being resilient, because that had to be tough. That had to be really tough to go through. I know he and Orlando are especially close the last couple of years. So, but to lose guys to Kentucky and Gonzaga, that says you're doing something right? Like those are 2 programs that have been unbelievable. So that's my long-winded answer, but I feel like it's an interesting group, and I think they all complement each other really well.
Yeah, but you nailed it. You nailed it. And that's the thing. A lot of our fans don't know the extent of Jeff Alexander's career. I mean, from his father being a Hall of Fame coach at the high school level. So he's been around this game for years. His time at Evansville, I remember I would bump into Jeff out, and He's an Illini. He may not have gone to Illinois, people, but he bleeds orange and blue. I mean, a lot of the times when we would bump into each other on the road, we were talking Illinois basketball, a lot of the time simply because he's just so close, coming out of Lincoln to being in Champaign. I've known Tim Anderson for years, and Brad talks about his development skills, his connections with the NBA and things of that nature. Tim was a heck of a high school coach. He was a heck of an AAU coach, and he has blossomed into doing what he has done for so many years, which is make college players into NBA players. So we will definitely benefit from that standpoint and from Chester.
And Deon, he did that at DePaul, which is not easy, right? Like he recruited well to DePaul and then developed them. I know they didn't win games, but like there was some individual development that was pretty impressive. So think about the people you can get into Illinois. That's pretty encouraging. And in Chester, right? Like there's Virginia Tech doing what they did in the ACC of all places. Without the 4-star, 5-star kind of talent they're going up against, they made NCAA tournaments there, and they're turning out really good, tough players. And we know Brad Underwood wants that.
Well, we talk about tough. I mean, look at how did Chester play when he was here. He was tough. He was hard-nosed, and those are going to be the guys that he recruits. I mean, Tim has that same mentality. So when they go out and they get guys, their guys are going to be tough-minded. And you're right, that fits right under what Brad Underwood wants to happen. Another big thing that took place this year is NIL. I mean, all I can say is I was born too soon. I wish I was born in today's age, but I'm happy that, these young people are able to partake from their name, image, likeness, and because that was not something that could be done back in my day. I mean, you know how many people I saw walking around in a Deon Thomas jersey, and none of that was happening. But I'm glad to see that these young people are able to benefit today. What are your thoughts about how it came about, and what do you see the future being with NIL?
Yeah, I'm just like you. I'm happy to see it. When we could see Nick Saban on these commercials, as he should, right? Like he should be able to do those things. It only makes sense now. It's great to see. I know Clemson's not having a good season, but the Clemson quarterback's on one of these Dr. Pepper commercials. That's fantastic. It's capitalism, but the NCAA has not been part of that capitalism kind of process. And I know it's capped a little bit and regulated, but that's part of it as well. I'm happy for these players. I do think we have to see how this all plays out, of how much it'll impact them. Like I asked Trent, like, how has this changed your life? And he said, well, it hasn't really changed my life. It just put a couple extra dollars in my pocket. And if that means for him, he can bring his family to come see games, because his family can't often come to see games. Think about how different that is. Like they can be part of his experience a little bit more. Kofi and I think Andre Curbelo can benefit a lot of this. And Andre's played it pretty well so far. Like you could be two of the bigger names on one of the bigger teams in the country. I think you can make money that might keep you in the NCAA a little bit longer. Kofi isn't here if NIL doesn't pass. And I'm sure 6 figures is within what he's going to make this year. Kofi Cockburn can make a good living in college basketball if he wanted to stay for 2 more years, right? Like, so that could change of coaches being able to keep their players instead of them going off to the G League and potentially making less money or similar money. Go get your education, right? And all these things while you can make money doing all this. But I think for the 10th or 11th guy on the bench, you're not going to make a ton, but if it makes life a little easier, why not? So I'm interested to see how this all plays out with the NCAA. It seems like it's pretty much hands off. How do you keep it from being pay for play? It basically kind of almost is at this point. But I don't have a huge problem with that, just because of all the money that is coming into college basketball and college sports. It started really, Deon, when you were involved in it, and the 80s when ESPN blows up and all this money just comes in, and you guys, the Flying Illini, and then you are watching all of this happen. Like, well, these coaches are making all this money. Like, why don't we get? And it's funny. Like, most players are probably getting a fair share with the scholarship and the additional things you're getting. But for the top guys, they should probably be getting a little more. And I think it's just adds a little bit of that capitalism, a meritocracy to the NCAA that I think is good for the sport. And I don't think it'll ruin the sport whatsoever. I don't. I think it actually probably benefits the players who stay in school a little bit longer because their brands could be big. Like Luka Garza and Ayo Dosunmu, I think about how much those guys could have made over their long careers.
Well, we're talking about careers, we're talking NIL. Some news broke today on Kofi Cockburn's 3-game suspension, and I can't say that I'm surprised the NCAA did what they did because it's the NCAA. I mean, I don't know a time when they have been consistent across the board, and I don't know if that's going to happen because you have people making, so many people making decisions that it's kind of hard to be, consistent when you don't have one straight head. But what were your thoughts about it? And give me, just your coverage and what do you think about the situation?
Yeah, I can understand why any decision the NCAA makes, people are upset about, especially you, Deon. I'm sure you have some thoughts about that. I think it's ridiculous that Will Wade is coaching at LSU.
Yes.
He hasn't faced really much penalty for that. Now, I don't agree with the people who say Mark Few only gets 1 game for a DUI. That's not within the NCAA's jurisdiction. They police amateurism. They don't police what the actual police do, which is the law, right? The actual state laws, local laws, and federal laws. So I don't agree with that. That's a Gonzaga. That's a police problem, right? Like this is within the NCAA's purview. And this might be a hot take for some of your listeners because they want Kofi Cockburn to play. I think this is fair. Like I think he broke a rule that was a rule when he did this, when he sold some gear that was team officially licensed. And the NCAA, this is an easy case for them. This is a really easy case. They see it on the player's trunk. That's a suspension. And based on previous ones, like the comparison for this is, remember the Ohio State tattoo scandal?
Yes.
Those guys got 5 or 6 games. That's half a season. So for 3 games, it's not great for Illinois, but you're missing 3 games. You could look at it as a silver lining. It's Jackson State. It's Arkansas State and Marquette. Like you could drop one of those games. For Illinois, you hope that doesn't matter in the long run. Maybe it's a seed line or whatever if you do, but also might get you a silver lining of Coleman Hawkins is going to play some 5 here. Omar Payne's going to get a lot of experience that might be necessary. And then you get Kofi Cockburn back for the Hall of Fame Classic. I think Kofi, he thought he was going pro, right? He was locked in on that. I just think he prematurely decided to try and profit and make a little bit of money, which I understand, but he had to know that if I do want to go back, I'm probably facing a penalty here. So I know there was a lot of rules that were changed. The deadlines were pushed back this year because of COVID. The NBA draft deadline, the withdrawal deadline was all a little bit later. But I just think him and his people could have been a little smarter about, hey, let's not do this for another month, right? Until we decide, are we definitely going in the draft? I think his mind was made up on that. But because of that mistake, he's paying the penalty of what that rule is. I mean, he broke the rule. Right. Am I morally, did he do anything wrong? No, but I do think the NCAA has that rule. So now they have to punish him. I think for Illinois, 3 games could have been worse, right? I think it could have been worse for them. And maybe they find a silver lining. I can understand why no one likes any kind of decision the NCAA makes, but I thought 2 or 3 games. Yeah, that was my, and you're hearing people say, 8, 10, that would have been ridiculous for me. But this is basically a slap on the wrist for him in Illinois, and it shouldn't impact their season in the long run, right? Like this isn't a season defining kind of suspension.
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm always, and you've known me for a long time, I'm always the eternal optimist. So I always like to look at the positive side of it. You're right. I thought it would personally be around 2 games. So 3 games is not far off of that. And as you mentioned, the kid thought he was leaving. He really didn't know. And this is why, in my opinion, when we need to have a position where people are helping these young people through the decisions that they make, whether it's transfer portal or whether it's entering their names into the draft, because so many of them listen to family, friends, and people that have things that are vested.
Yeah.
Whereas instead of having someone that has nothing vested in this except for helping those kids make the right decision. Because you're right. If you go to someone else that is not mom, dad, brother, that are going to benefit when you make it to the pros, maybe you say, you know what, that hold off for a month on this, or hold off until you're drafted and then you can do this, because it's not going to be devalued. You're not going to lose any money on that. So this is, some of the places where the adults in the room can put buffers in for these young people. Do you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I don't know this for sure, but it seems like he got bad advice, right? When it came to that specific thing, and
Right.
or someone wasn't there to say, "Hey, don't do this." And it's not like the coaches are knowing everything these players are doing, and the people
Very true.
that are influencers. But obviously, I think Illinois coaches, when they saw that he was selling stuff, were probably like, "Oh no, this could be a problem," right?
Yeah.
Like, and they knew that. So yeah, the kid wasn't malicious. Nobody got hurt involved with this, but he
Yeah.
did break a rule, and now he's got to pay a punishment that at least is small enough that it shouldn't impact, his ability to have a good season and Illinois' ability to have a good season. Because if they would have missed Kansas City, if they would have missed the start of Big Ten play, that would have
Yes.
really, really hurt this team. And then you're talking about just delaying, this team changing, right? Like, this team will have to bring him back into the fold, and he can practice through all this. So that's nice. But just to have that long of a disruption and then change your team could have hurt this team. Maybe it still does a little bit when they go to Kansas City, but by the time Big Ten play starts, which is the thing that matters the most until you get to NCAA tournament play, this team should be in a rhythm and kind of know how they're going to play all together.
Yeah, that's a good sky high view of the whole situation. I agree. The kid, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, and you're right. You're never in a situation where everyone knows everything and all of the rules and you can make the right decisions all the time. But when I look at this, I'm not looking at it in just the terms of Illinois. I mean, I was talking to Coach earlier when the whole thing jumped off with the transfer portal, and he was like, Deon, this is going to get worse. He was like, so many kids are going to get hurt with this. And he's 100% right, because you have kids that, if you average 10 points and you leave, you're going to normally have a place to go as a freshman, because some other, institution will bring you in. But if you're one of these kids that, if you're a 2, 3, let's say a 4-star player and you played none on your team, nobody may not take it because they may say, okay, the kid was overrated or something of that nature. And then now you're sitting there, no scholarship, and you have to go D2, D3, NAIA, or some other level, which hurts your ability to possibly get back to the NCAA Division I level, or even to get drafted. So I was just saying, I think there's, not a Kofi thing, but I think overarching, the NCAA, if they really want to help these kids, need to put an arm in place to give these kids some advice. Now, will the kids listen? I don't know, but our job as adults is to make sure that our kids don't step in it.
Yeah, I think the NCAA, what they did with this one-time transfer rule, Deon, is by taking out that penalty, they allowed these kids to make their own decisions, but with freedom comes probably some mistakes.
Consequences.
Yeah, probably some mistakes of you leaving too early or all these things, which is why, again, an example of this is Coleman Hawkins. Like, maybe he didn't play as much as he wanted his freshman year, but he understood the process. He understood that, like, hey, I have to get better, and I can still succeed at Illinois. So I think that's what's going to be interesting to see. I've talked with Brad about this before, that, a lot of schools are recruiting high school prospects less because they're afraid that, hey, I'll take him as a freshman and then he'll leave after 1 year and I got to fill this spot again. You take a transfer, that guy can't transfer again without a penalty. So you have him probably for multiple years, unlike a freshman. But he still believes in these young guys and growing them and developing them. And I think Luke Goody is certainly committed to that process. And it'll be interesting to see future classes, how that goes. Like, how many freshmen do you take compared to transfers? Because I do think the ideal is still these guys who have been in the program. So you're not teaching the same thing to 6 or 7 guys every year.
Yes.
You just got 2 or 3 freshmen like this year. They just got to, okay, bring them in, maybe a transfer to, but you have a culture and a foundation already set. A lot of these coaches, as Deon, are like, we have to build this culture every year. Like we have no foundation. Like there's 7 or 8 players, Nebraska, Penn State, like Purdue, like a lot of these teams are going through that. And that's why the teams we're talking about towards the top of the Big Ten, Ohio State, Illinois, Purdue, Michigan's just getting enough talent to be at the top. But those are the programs we're talking about a lot because they bring so much experience and proven guys back.
No doubt, because that is definitely a hard one. If you're going to be, I mean, ask the guy that coached at the junior college level, where you
Tough,
bring
right?
in, oh man, where you have probably a half to 3/4 of your team is different every year because kids go on, they flunk out, they don't take school serious, and then you're totally revamping things. But we both know. Brad's kind of used to that as a JUCO coach, and now he's climbed and he's sitting where he is now. So gives him a little bit more of a view to be able to pick out those things as he's trying to do. But as he said the whole time, it's characters, character over characters. And I think that, you start when you bring a freshman in, that's when you get to build the character in those guys that you want. So he'll definitely continue to go, I think more so all in on the freshmen than on the transfers. But like you said, if you can pick 1 or 2 really good guys that'll end up being in your program for at least a couple years, then you got to look at it. I mean, you have to involve it. But tell me a little bit about what's going on the Werner show now. What's going up with everything that you're doing, big guy?
Well, I said goodbye to radio about a year ago. Just as you know, Deon is a father of a couple girls. Just being able to be flexible with all that, but we're still at Illini Inquirer, man. It keeps me busy, but it doesn't feel like work when we get to cover sports and get to do what I love every day. And I got a great team with Derek Piper covering hoops, and Joey Wagner's one of the best writers on this beat. Covering both football and basketball. So covering the start of the Brett Bielema era. I know they're not quite as getting the wins as they wanted to. They've been competitive, but I think he's just brought a good college coach. I think he's setting a foundation for Illinois where I had a lot of respect for Lovie Smith, but he just wasn't the experienced college coach that I think Illinois needed to kind of build the foundation. Brett knows how to do that. We'll see, if he can make those steps to ultimately get that sustained success that Illinois hasn't had. But covering the basketball program, man, it was a long decade of, when I was in college, D Brown was still there, and it was just a different kind of atmosphere to sort of see it fall off, but then to see it rise back with Brad has been really fun to cover. These players he's had are great for us. I mean, you've talked with Kofi and Andre Curbelo and Io. It's like talking to pros, and they will be pros, but they are fun characters to cover and really good kids. So it's been fun to do that. But we got the podcast, we got recruiting updates, all of that. So keeps me busy, man. But that beats the alternative.
Well, I have to go a little bit off topic here now.
Sure.
I'm looking behind you, man. And I see you got the Illini bobbleheads back there. Man, you got the Ultimate Warrior on your dress, baby. See, that's back from my day. I used to be a
90s,
huge wrestling fan.
90s WWF. Like this is back in WWF days. Yeah. Ultimate
Warrior
was my guy. He used to do like the
baby.
Run into the stadium. And then I can tilt my thing up. There's a Bret Hart book up there.
There you go.
It's his autobiography. If you liked wrestling in the 80s and 90s, it is probably my favorite book, one of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, I was a big fan of Bret Hart and Ultimate Warrior. Very different wrestlers and personalities, but now I haven't been into it since I was a kid, but it was such a fun time watching that growing up with my brother.
Oh, no doubt, man. I mean, who didn't like the Hart Foundation? How could you not? I mean, he was an excellence of execution.
Best there is, best there was, best there ever will be. That's right.
Exactly. So I started watching wrestling, and I know we're way off topic here, man, but I started watching wrestling in the late 70s. I'm talking about like way back with Dick the Bruiser, the Crusher, Bobo Brazil, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, actually The Rock's father, so High Chief Peter Maivia, his grandfather. So I've been a huge wrestling fan for years. And my wife and she still looks at me sometimes because she'll come downstairs when they have the pay-per-views on, for the WWE, and I'm watching it. She's like, really? You watching it again?
It's hard, but it's fun, man. Yeah,
Exactly.
I got back into it at the turn of the century with like Stone Cold Steve Austin and all of that. But after that, I kind of just focused on the sports angle of it. But you were mentioning all those wrestlers, and Bret Hart writes about that, man. Like he goes through it because his family's been so big in all the territories in Canada and the U.S. and the Vince McMahon and how he built that empire. It's a fantastic read, but it's an interesting industry, man. How Vince McMahon just kind of turned this territorial stuff into this one huge empire of entertainment. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up. What's the title?
Let's see. It's just Hitman.
Okay.
It's autobiography. I'm sure if you just look up Bret Hart autobiography, you'll find it there.
Yeah, I definitely would like to read that, man. So, Jeremy, as always, brother, I appreciate you joining me. I like to give my guests a minute or so to address the crowd. So here's your opportunity, JW. You got Illini Nation. You already got them. So you got Illini Nation on Champaign on Ice.
Yeah, I would just say have fun with this. I know there's so much angst with Illini sports, Deon, because they're always wondering when's the shoe going to drop. And I always feel like last year, the year before, I know the NCAA tournament did not go the way you wanted, but you have a really good basketball program and you're not guaranteed to have it. I think Illinois fans know that for a long time, but I just think Brad has set a really strong foundation that just objectively, from my point, this should be one of the better teams in the Big Ten for a while. I think Chris Holtman's doing great things. How can you not be impressed by Juwan Howard? We know Tom Izzo is still really, really good. I think Matt Painter is one of the best coaches in the country. So there's a lot of competition, but to be among that group again, take a moment to enjoy that because that's really hard to do. And Brad deserves a lot of credit for that. And to get Io for a third year, to get Kofi Cockburn for a third year, that's really fortunate for Illinois, but it's also credit to Brad that those guys will want to stay in his program because they feel like they can develop and get better. So that's all I would say. I know there's going to be a loss you don't like to happen. There's going to be a recruiting loss you don't like, but throughout the coaching changes you're talking about, Deon, I felt Illinois basketball was going to be fine because I think the head guy is really good at his job.
And thank you, JB, man. Illini Nation, you heard it straight from Jeremy Werner, and I agree with him 100%. We are on firm footing and look forward to having you again, JW. So this is Champaign on Ice. Thank you. And I could not do this, of course, but let me go before I get off of here with the Field of 68. If you have not listened to the family of podcasts on the Field of 68 Illini Nation, you better do it. This is all 68 of the top programs in the country that they cover across the country. So there's some good listening on there. You can find them on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also to my family and friends over at Bet River Sports Bet, couldn't do it without you guys. So appreciative of what you do and for sponsoring Champaign on Ice this season. So JB, appreciate you again, man. And Illini Nation, love, peace, and hair grease. Love you much. Go Illini.